Robert is one of the most common names in the English-speaking world. It sits on office doors, school registers, and family trees without anyone giving it a second thought. But Robert is not English. It is not French or Latin or Greek. It is a Germanic warrior name. Built by one of the most feared tribal peoples in ancient European history, carried into Britain by Viking settlers and Norman conquerors, worn by kings who changed the political map of Europe permanently, and the bloodline it has been quietly transporting across 15 centuries, is one of the most consequential in the entire Western world. Robert begins in ancient Germanic as Hrodebert. Old Germanic elements fused into a single declaration. Hrod, meaning fame, glory, renown. The kind of fame earned in battle. The kind of glory that outlasts the man who earned it. And Beracht, meaning bright, shining, brilliant. Fame bright, shining with glory. Together, Hrodebert means bright with glory, the kind of name you give a child when you expect them to be known. Not quietly, not modestly, but loudly and permanently across the world they walk through. This was not a soft name. It was a warrior declaration. In Germanic tribal culture, a name was a statement of identity and aspiration, the qualities a family intended their child to embody. Hrodebert was the name you gave the son you expected to be remembered. From Old Germanic, the name evolved through the Franks, the Germanic tribe that built the Carolingian Empire across what is now France and Germany, where it became Robert as the Frankish language softened its consonants over generations. From Frankish, it entered Old French unchanged in sound but completely transformed in cultural context. From French, it crossed the English Channel, and when it did, it came with an army. Before the Normans brought Robert to Britain, the Vikings had already seeded it into northern and eastern coastlines. Norse settlers arriving from the 8th century onward brought Germanic naming conventions with them, including names built on the Hrod glory route that Robert shares. The Danelaw, Viking-controlled northern and eastern England, became a naming crucible where Old Norse and Old English traditions mixed, embedding Germanic glory names into local population before the Norman conquest happened. In Scotland, Norse settlers arriving through Orkney, Shetland, and the Western Isles carried similar names into Gaelic-speaking communities that had no prior tradition of Germanic personal names. Robert appearing in Scottish records before 1066 is almost certainly pointing at Norse settlement ancestry rather than Norman influence. This matters for your own ancestry reading. A Robert in northern or eastern England before the 12th century is more likely pointing at Viking Danelaw ancestry. A Robert in Scotland from the same period is more likely pointing at Norse settlement. The same Germanic root, two completely different migration routes. The Viking settlement seeded Robert into Britain. The Norman conquest of 1066 made it dominant. The Normans, themselves descendants of Norse Vikings who had settled northern France, carried Robert as one of their most prestigious names. It was the name of Robert I of Normandy, the father of William the Conqueror, and of Robert Curthose, William's eldest son who inherited Normandy after the conquest. When the Norman aristocracy flooded into Britain after Hastings, Robert was among the most common Norman male names, and its frequency in post-conquest records reflects the scale of Norman aristocratic settlement. Names filter downward through social structures. A name dominant in the aristocracy becomes aspirational in the classes below it. By the 12th century, English families with no Norman blood were naming sons Robert, because the name carried the social weight of the conquering class. Robert the Bruce, Roybert a Brewis in Scottish Gaelic, is the most significant Robert in British history. Born in 1274 to an Anglo-Norman family with a claim to the Scottish throne, he became King of Scotland in 1306, when English military occupation had reduced Scottish resistance to almost nothing. Edward had defeated every Scottish force in the field. William Wallace had been captured and executed. Scotland as an independent kingdom appeared finished. Robert the Bruce refused to accept it. He launched a guerrilla campaign from the Scottish Highlands that rebuilt Scottish military capability over 8 years of relentless fighting. At Bannockburn in June 1314, he faced an English army of roughly 20,000 men with perhaps 7,000 Scots, and won completely. The English cavalry broke against the Scottish formations and fled. Edward II abandoned the battlefield. Scottish independence was secured for 3 centuries. Robert Guiscard, the Norman conqueror of southern Italy and Sicily, built a Mediterranean kingdom in the 11th century, fusing Norman, Byzantine, Arab, and Italian cultures. He drove the Byzantine Empire from southern Italy, conquered Sicily from its Arab rulers, and at one point held Pope Gregory VII as his prisoner. A Norman adventurer from a minor family who built an empire through personal military brilliance and refusal to accept the limits others placed on him. Robert Walpole, the first Prime Minister of Great Britain in the modern sense, serving 1721 to 1742, created the template for parliamentary government that every subsequent democratic system in the English-speaking world inherited. The concept of cabinet government led by a prime minister responsible to parliament, rather than the monarch, the foundational structure of British and Commonwealth democracy, was essentially invented by a man named Robert. In Scottish families, Robert carries a weight unlike anywhere else in the English-speaking world. The name of Robert the Bruce was so venerated in Scottish culture that it became a consistent marker of national identity. A Robert appearing repeatedly in a Scottish family line before 1700 is almost certainly carrying the cultural memory of the Bruce alongside the personal name. In Norman-descended English families, those carrying French origin surnames suggesting post-conquest settlement, Robert appearing in 12th and 13th century records is almost certainly pointing at Norman aristocratic naming tradition directly. In Irish families, Robert appears primarily in records connected to Anglo-Norman settlement from the 12th century onward. A Robert in an Irish family before 1600 is almost certainly pointing at Anglo-Norman ancestry rather than native Gaelic lineage. In American families with Scottish or Scots-Irish ancestry, Robert running through multiple generations before 1800 reflects the Presbyterian naming tradition that carried the name from the Scottish lowlands and Ulster into the Appalachian backcountry. One of the most culturally specific naming traditions in American colonial history. 1500 years ago, a Germanic people built a name that meant shining with glory and gave it to the sons they expected the world to remember. That name crossed from the Germanic tribes into the Frankish Empire, from the Franks into the Viking world, from the Vikings into Normandy, from Normandy into Britain, from Britain into Scotland, from Scotland into America, arriving everywhere at moments of consequence, attached to men who refuse to accept the limits history placed on them. Robert is not a common name. It only looks common because it keeps appearing at the center of things, and has been doing so for 15 centuries without stopping. Subscribe. See ya.